With the hurricane season over, we finally got to hear from Waddell, Tom Dundon, and Rod Brind'Amour, all in their respective interviews following the end of the season. We will dive into all of those in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Andrew Schnittker. How are you doing today, Andrew?
I'm doing wonderful. We've got a wealth of information to discuss here tonight, this morning, whenever you're listening to this.
Yes, lot to talk about in terms of Waddell's exit interview, Tom Dundon doing a podcast with Joe Ovius and Joe Giglio, and then Rod Brind'Amour gave us a little bit, but not a lot. Exit interviews aren't really his thing, but we will still talk about it. But starting off with Don Waddell's exit interview. First off, he was disappointed they did not win the cup, as were we all. We all kind of shared in that sentiment. But they do have to look that they had the second best record in the NHL, 5 straight years of the playoffs, 3 straight division titles, and it feels like the Hurricanes did take a big step forward this year. And I agree. So I agree as well. It really felt like when they were on, and they could be a team that could go all the way. It's just going to be parlaying that into next season and beyond. He did say that really likes the team. We've obviously heard that for years and years and years and years, following the old regime that the Hurricanes had. But now the Hurricanes have a good group. We like our group thing. It's not as annoying as it used to be. But they're always looking to add. Has already been on the phone talking to other GMs. Not a whole lot of holes and areas to address, but goal scoring definitely being one that they're looking to address. And they also did have injuries to key players as well. But in terms of what Waddell said, Andrew, what were your thoughts on what he was saying?
Yeah, he said I think he had a lot of interesting things to say.
Mm-hmm.
He talked about wanting to add goal scoring, but also wanting to get heavier. He said, that the Hurricanes may not be looking to go out and add a pure goal scorer like they did last year with Max Pacioretty, that they might be relying on, a little bit more of some internal improvements like Seth Jarvis continuing to develop, hoping for a bounce back year from Teuvo Teravainen. Don't know that I particularly love that approach, but we can talk about that later. Sounding like, again, like with Jordan Staal, like they want him back, like they don't foresee that being much of an issue. He talked about, again, if they can add the right pieces, they will. You always hear that if we can make our team better, we will. That the Hurricanes do have a lot of cap space this offseason. Now they have to be careful with what kind of term they add, because that cap space may not be there in 2 years with some of the new deals that they're going to have to sign for key guys. But they could do what they've done in off seasons past, like you saw them do last offseason with Max Pacioretty, and go off after some good players from some teams that are cap strapped. So, they could be taking some of their familiar approaches in that regard. Also talked about they haven't started negotiations just yet, but they'll start talks quick with Aho, Shea, Pesci, guys who have a year left on their deal before they are UFAs the next year, that they really want to try to go into the year without guys playing out the last year of their deals, with knowing that they're going to have these guys locked in. So it's feeling like a very, like wanting to kind of get the band, bring the band back together, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree there. And that was something we had talked about already with Sebastian Aho and his exit interview. Did feel that there were some folks blowing his out of proportion. But Waddell saying they haven't even started negotiations yet. Like, come on, guys. And that's not one I'm worried about. Brett Pesce, I'm not worried about it. Brady Shea, I'm not worried about it. It was interesting though, with Teuvo Teravainen. Uh, you know, we're kind of going to talk more about him later in the off season as far as a potential trade there, but his has been a name that has been circling around the trade market, and potential less interest there in him as far as locking him up for a few more years. That's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I do feel like if they could get it done at the right price, then they will. I feel it's not one that they're just wanting to be like, get on out of here. I definitely don't feel that's the case. But it's also not going to be one where I feel that he's untouchable, if that makes sense. I feel that if the right deal came along, they would let him go, because at the end of the day, if you want to get good, you got to give up good. And I do always say, no one, if Wayne Gretzky can get traded, then anyone can get traded. If Wayne Gretzky can get traded, then Teuvo Teravainen can get traded. Obviously, we're not saying he is going to, but it is interesting to see just that there may be a little bit less interest there than some of the other guys.
Yeah, I could be reading too much into it.
Yeah.
That was just kind of the vibe that I got of him not really being mentioned in the same vein with like Aho and Pesce and Shea. Some other things that he talked about: Max Pacioretty, obviously coming off the 2 Achilles tears in the last year, a free agent. That the Hurricanes, that it's going to depend on how he's doing. That that they may bring him back, they may not, that they have to be, see how he's doing, be careful that they don't get caught waiting on something that's not there. And then the goalies, they have Frederick Anderson and Antti Ranta, who are both going to be UFAs. He said, both guys have expressed that they want to be back. The Hurricanes know they're good, that, that they may want to bring them back. They also need to do their due diligence on what's out there. They have Pyotr Kochetkov under contract. And he also felt, that they may need a 3 goalie system again, just because of the way things go these days, and people get hurt. The one other really interesting thing that came out of this was, the Hurricanes may not have their own AHL affiliate next year, with the reports that the Chicago Wolves are going to basically go independent, not be an AHL team, not be an NHL affiliated team, but that the long-term plan is to have their own affiliate by 2024-25, but that, like, for this year, they could, some guys will obviously be playing in Europe, and they could loan some of their prospects out to other organizations' affiliates for this next year.
Yeah, that is going to be a very, very interesting thing this offseason. We'll continue to follow that as the offseason goes on. We'll definitely talk to Sarah Avampado again. She knows all about the AHL stuff. So we're definitely going to be hearing from her a lot this offseason in that regard. But yeah, the Max Pacioretty thing, I feel I'm not expecting him to be back. I feel if they could do a very cheap 1-year deal, yeah, then maybe, just to see. But
it's still a
anything more than
finite
like,
number of roster spots.
Exactly. Exactly. I feel like the deal would have to be right for them to take that chance, because they did see something there. They wouldn't have made that trade if they didn't. So yeah, if they could get the right deal done, I could see it definitely be like a 1-year thing. I would say probably like $1 or $2 million. It would not be a hefty contract by any means. But outside of that, yeah, I'm not expecting him to be back. Anderson and Ranta both wanting to come back. That's interesting because we were kind of looking at maybe just Anderson and then Kochetkov, being on the roster, full time next year, or them, going out and getting someone else, whether it be free agency or trade. That's going to be interesting to see how that goes, especially if they continue running with the system they are. If they do, I do not see them doing both goalies on the same term again. I could see, Anderson 2-3 years, Ronta, maybe like a year less. Like say Anderson signs a 2, Ronta signs a 1, or Anderson a 3, Ronta a 2. I definitely don't see them doing both on 2-year or 3-year, the same term. I didn't like that move when they did it, because they would both be UFAs at the same time. I didn't like that move when they did it then, and I really hope they avoid doing that now. But if they can get them both back, I say do it. If the deal is right, because both have proven that they can play and they can succeed here, so they can get them both. I'm fine with both coming back.
Well, and the other piece of that is Pyotr Kochetkov.
Mm-hmm.
It's a 4-year deal, $2 million AAV. Paying a guy $2 million to play in the AHL would not be ideal, but there's no huge rush to hand him the keys, the reins, and this is right away necessarily. And he's still waiver exempt, so he could still go to Chicago, no problem. So if they wanted, I think it'd still be very, very surprising to me if all three of those guys were, there again next season. But if that's what they wanted to do, they certainly could.
Yeah, it's one of the those things. I still expect Kochetkov to be in the NHL next year, but if they can, that's what they want to roll with. They've proven they can make that work, and at the end of the day, if that's what they feel is best, then fine. But that's just going to be something we just have to wait and see. Come July 1, we'll see what happens there, because again, Pyotr Kochetkov, what are they going to want to do there? Are you really going to want to pay a guy $2 million a year to play in the AHL? Because the Chicago Wolves now wanting to be the Notre Dame of the AHL and not be affiliated with anyone. We'll just have to wait and see what happens there. But we did get to hear from Tom Dundon on the OG podcast, and we will talk about what he had to say on that podcast right after this quick break, folks. Now, folks, if you're wanting to go to a NBA Finals game, a Stanley Cup final game, Gametime is the place to do it, folks. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. The Carolina Hurricanes season is over, but there's going to be a lot of concerts and comedy shows coming through. So Gametime has you covered for that. And, if you're able to go to an NBA Finals game or a Stanley Cup final game, Gametime has you covered for that as well. So forget planning month in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Don't get surprised by a pole in your way, because that is never fun. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're all set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you'll never have to dig through your email, because that is never fun, guys. So snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, diving into Tom Dundon's interview that he had with Joe Ovies and Joe Giglio over on their podcast. and to Luke DeCock as well of the News Observer. I did say that Sebastian Aho is the main priority for this team. No surprise there, of course, saying, quote,
I'm sensing a
"This is
theme
his
here.
team now. He is not playing anywhere else."
Yeah, he
Yeah.
said he said that in so he's saying these things in different places to different people. He said this is
Yes.
his team now to Luke. He said he's not playing anywhere else to Ovius and Gilio.
Yes.
Look, and we could talk about this in our takeaways piece too, and I certainly want to, but if you're a Hurricanes fan who wants Sebastian Aho to be here long term, I don't know what else you could hear other than that the extension has been signed, obviously, but to hear that from the owner, because the other thing he talked about on Ovius and Gilio is there not being any hard feelings about the way things went last year or last time around with the offer sheet, because ultimately, he cares about Sebastian as a person. Sebastian got a deal that was good for him. Ultimately, that's been a deal that was good for the Hurricanes. I mean, like Montreal did not go nearly as hard as they should have with that offer sheet if they wanted the Hurricanes not to match it. But ultimately, I don't think Sebastian Aho is at all. And I think he wants to be here, especially if the money is right. Who's ultimately in charge of how much money he gets offered and if he gets the amount of money he's asking for? Tom Dundon. That's the guy who's signing the check. If he's out here saying this is his team, this is where he's going to be, he's not going to play anywhere else. To me personally, that makes me feel even more strongly like it's going to get done.
Yeah, I agree there. It really is nice to hear that coming out of the owner's mouth. Obviously we'd feel good if Don Waddell said that, if Eric Tulsky said it, if Rod Brind'Amour said it. Yeah, we'd feel good about that. But to hear it come from the guy that signs the checks, that feels pretty darn good. To hear it come from him, and that they are committed to getting him taken care of long term. Again, this is his team now, and he's not playing anywhere else. You gotta love hearing that. And one thing is worth mentioning here. We talked about it in depth in our episode talking about the PNC Arena renovations. Dundon, of course, did talk about that with Ovius and Gilio and Luke DeCock as well, of things he wants to get done there. Long story short, here again, if you want to hear our in-depth thoughts, you can go listen to that episode once you get done with this one. But he's down to do what they got to do to get this done. It's just the other parties involved, Centennial Authority, NC State, City of Raleigh, Wake County, getting everyone on the same page to get this done. A lot of complex moving parts when it comes to that. And again, we talk about that in depth already. We vent our frustrations on that. But the fact that he is willing to get it done, and big thing with that was they want to stay here. That is a big takeaway from that. Is they're not like, oh if you don't get this done by August, we're gonna start looking for a new home. We're gonna use our opt out in 2024. And we're going to start looking for a new home. It's nice to hear that he is committed to keeping the team here, and he's willing to do business with these other parties to get the arena up to date. That was really nice to hear as well.
Yeah, and some of the other interesting things that he talked about, he also mentioned, wanting to look at extensions for Pesci and Shea. He did mention Teravainen too, and again, maybe I'm reading this into this too much, but he definitely wasn't like with Aho and Pesci and Shea when he mentioned him. So that's somewhat interesting to me. He talked about, when the Hurricanes look at making deals and looking at adding guys at the deadline and potentially going all in about, wanting them to have a chance every year, not necessarily just go all in for 1 year, wanting to keep this group that's been successful, that's been in the playoffs every year together as much as possible, and talked about, how hard it is when the Hurricanes get to the point that they are now about finding that deal that makes them that much better. He alluded to, deals that they were in on and things that they offered and assets that other people valued more than their assets. Reading between the lines, I would not be shocked if at least some of that was referring to the Hurricanes reportedly being the runner-up from Matthew Tkachuk last summer,
Hmm.
as Pierre LeBrun did it for The Athletic, did a big piece on going into this series in the Eastern Conference Final. So, yeah, I mean, a lot to unpack there about kind of, the way that the Hurricanes have approached these things in terms of not making a big move at the deadline, because I think when part of that is when these guys get so expensive and they need those picks and prospects to help put young, cheap talent around them, they want to have those.
Yeah, and one thing always with the NHL is that they don't have the same salary cap that the NBA, NFL, MLB that do, where they can offer, like your guy Patrick Holmes getting a $500 million contract.
Well, the
You know,
NFL salary cap is fake anyway, so
yeah, I know. And then of course the NBA has its luxury tax and all that stuff. The NHL doesn't have, they can't hand out these such big deals, so they do have to be a lot smarter with their money, because guys are wanting more and more, so they're having to do a bit more finagling and all that. So it really is going to be interesting to see how the Hurricanes handle these extensions for Sebastian Aho, Brady Shea, Brett Pesce, Teuvo Teravainen. It's all going to be very, very interesting. Now we did say that we did hear a little bit from Rod Brind'Amour. He does not say much in these things. Not really. This isn't his area really. He did say power play needs to be more effective and dynamic.
we
Thank you,
agree.
Captain Obvious.
We're there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's right. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
he's
going to
right.
be.
Obviously, no disrespecting, saying thank you, Captain Obvious, but I mean, yeah, yeah, we talked about it at length this season.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how would they approach that, because I think over the past few years we've seen the personnel on the power play change a good bit.
Yeah,
It's got to be a systemic thing. It's got to be a structural thing. You wonder if they make any sort of adjustments to the coaching staff to
they
try to
got
deal
to.
with that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's a good mindset for him to have going into the offseason for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, uh, I believe I talked about it, kind of early and midway through the season, potentially making some changing in terms of coaching for the power play. I do think that's a move that needs to be made this offseason. As far as who would they bring in, I don't know. But we'll just have to wait and see on that. But I agree there. I think that they need to, make a more large scale change in terms of improving this power play. They, because, it, the player, yeah, it's just that time. This is a continual issue year after year after year. It's got to change.
Yeah, I agree.
But we did obviously a lot to digest here. We both have our respective takeaways from these exit interviews, and we will continue to dive into those right after this quick break, folks. All right. Now, time to give our takeaways from Dom Waddell's exit interviews. We gave our very brief takeaways from Rod Brind'Amour's because he didn't say a whole lot. And then Tom Dundon's interview with Luke DeCock and Joe Ovius and Joe Giglio, respectively. And it's going to be an interesting offseason, I feel. That's my biggest takeaway from here in many regards. Like we were just talking about, potential coaching change when it comes to the power play. I feel that is a move that needs to be made. And we're both in agreement there. And then contracts. What are we going to be doing there? That's going to be very interesting. Who's going to be on the trade block? Potential free agents, guys coming back, guys walking. It's going to be a very, very interesting offseason, very much like we've had the past couple. I think there's going to be a decent amount of turnover for sure.
I think you're right. I think Waddell alluded to it, that we could see some trades, that they view free agency as kind of a dangerous day. I've looked at the free agent list. There's some guys I think could be nice additions for the Hurricanes, but nobody I'd break the bank for. We can obviously talk about that on another day. I think the trade market is the route that they've gone more so in recent years to make their big additions. But yeah, I mean, it is there's so much that they have to do. I mean, they have to figure out what they're doing with Anderson and Ronta. They either have to re-sign at least one of them, or sign or trade for at least one new NHL goalie. They have to re-sign Jordan Stahl. I think they're going to do that.
Yeah.
They have to figure out what they're going to do with a guy like Jesper Fast, who's been an underratedly important part of this group. And then there's all those big contract extensions. The biggest takeaway from me from all this, from hearing Don Waddell speaking to the media at his press conference, from reading the Luke DeCock story, from listening to Tom Dundon on Ovius and Giglio and also from reading a report about it from Pierre LeBrun of The Athletic, that Sebastian Aho getting an extension is a big time priority for the Hurricanes. I think that's something they really want to get done this summer. He's their guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of their centerpieces. He's part of this team. Like Dundon said, this is his team. He's the guy. I'm not going to speculate about a timeline, but like you've seen in the past, some teams, because like you can't actually officially sign an extension for guys whose contracts are up next year until July 1. In the past, teams have made like their big July 1 move, coming out and announcing a big extension for somebody. I'd be surprised, not shocked, if the Hurricanes did that with Sebastian Aho, just because I'm feeling, at least, we'll see, actions speak louder than words, but just on what everybody's saying, I'm feeling urgency to get this done.
Yeah, I agree there. And it is nice to see that it is such a pressing need that they're not going to drag this out. They're wanting to get this done yesterday. It's nice to hear that. And I do agree. I think that this is going to be, frankly, maybe their first move of the offseason of getting that Sebastian Aho extension done. That could very well be their first move. That's kind of where they're focusing all of their, or not all of it, but the majority of their attention right now is getting that deal done, because we talked about it a few days ago of not wanting to drag this out, through the summer, through next season, into next summer. This is something you want to get done now, to where you're not having to worry about it next summer. Yeah. And, potentially losing him for nothing, and it's nice to hear that this is such a major priority for the team. Like you said, actions speak louder than words in that. But I do definitely think we will see an Aho extension this summer. Is it one that's announced July 1? I don't know. This is obviously, well out of our wheelhouse of, things we know how to do. So this is obviously a complicated thing of, getting that stuff done, term right, money right. Obviously, they're going to want long term, 7-8 years, of course. Then, of course, the money, just how all that stuff is going to work, because you figure the salary cap is going to continue to grow up over the next few years. I want to say next season or the season after it is supposed to go up again. But that's just something we'll just have to wait and see there. And then, of course, the Brady Shea, the Brett Pesce extension as well, re-signing Jordan Stahl, Jesper Fast, Freddie Anderson. Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. And then, like I said, trades. Like you said, trades is where they tend to make most of their splashes. Who would they move? We kind of speculate on Teuvo Teravainen. Would he be a guy that would get moved? Or, there's just so many things going on here. And then, again, we talked about in another episode that you can go listen to after this. But, the arena renovations in Luke DeCock's article, he mentioned, sometime in July is when we could really be hearing and getting more updates on when this stuff can be happening. So that's going to be a big thing for the Hurricanes this summer as well, outside of the players.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a definitely, something that it's not going to be a boring off season. That's for sure. There's going to be a lot happening and a lot to think about and talk about in Hurricanes land.
Yeah, I know. And it's, one thing that I think that folks aren't talking about. We'll talk more about this as the offseason rolls on. Is the Eric Tulsky of what his future could be like with the Hurricanes? Obviously, Toronto and Pittsburgh have filled their openings respectively already. But yeah, he's a guy that has been really instrumental in the Hurricanes front office over the past few years, and kind of feels due for a promotion. And I saw someone on Twitter today, I forget who it was. Do they promote Waddell to president and then Tulsky to GM, or does Tulsky go somewhere else to take over a GM role? Yeah, that's honestly going to be something to watch as well. I really wouldn't be surprised if they do the former promote internally of Waddell and Tulsky to new positions. That wouldn't surprise me, but that's again just going to be something we just got to wait and see.
Yeah, I think I mean, I don't want to get too far into this now, but I do think if the Hurricanes don't do what you're suggesting in terms of promoting both Waddell and Tulsky, it's probably a matter of when, not if, Tulsky gets a GM job somewhere else, just because he's so highly regarded for the work that he's done with the Hurricanes, as he should be.
Yes, very much so. And we will continue to talk about that as the off season rolls on, as well as everything else we've talked about today. All the extensions, the arena, free agents, all of that stuff. We will continue to talk about that as the off season rolls on. So make sure you are following the show on Twitter at LO_Hurricanes, following myself on Twitter at Jared Ellis _96, following Andrew on Twitter at ASchnit53. And as always, folks, even though the season is over, let's go Canes.